Glad that day is over. All the classes were so boring today, said Lisa. I think it was all right. Maybe you just hated the subjects covered today. Chemistry, math, and geography. You don't like any of them, remember? Said Amy. Well, maybe you're right, babe. I don't know how many times I nodded off in class today, said Lisa. At least tomorrow's going to be fun. We'll be having dodgeball again tomorrow, said Amy. Yeah, can't wait to get my revenge on that Stacy, said Lisa. Ignore her. She's just too competitive. Anyway, I'm getting hungry. There's this new eatery right down the street. You want to go? I heard that they serve incredible meatball soup, asked Amy. Okay, sure, if it's on you, said Lisa with a cheeky smile. All right, sure, next time's on you, replied Amy. After the two girls arrived at the place, a small meatball soup hut sat there, with only makeshift benches on its sides, but a line of about 20 people queued to order. After done with their meal and walking back home, Amy said, Wow, that was amazing. Can't remember the last time I had such satisfying soup. For sure, the soup was just right, not too salty, but not too bland either, said Lisa. As months passed by, the little meatball soup hut grew into a small cafe, and soon enough, it became a full-blown restaurant, all in less than a year. The only thing that didn't change was their buying system. Customers still had to queue to order their food before they could take a seat in the restaurant. The queue for their food kept getting longer, but no one complained, knowing that the food was worth the wait. One day after school ended, Amy said to Lisa again, Hey, it's been so long since we ate at that awesome meatball soup place. Especially since it grew into a proper restaurant, we haven't been there. Can we go, please? Yeah, actually, I don't mind having some meatball soup. It's been a while since I had some, said Lisa. The two friends walked to the restaurant, and after finally arriving, Amy said, Wow, they really got much bigger within a few months. The last time we came, it was so tiny. Okay, the queue is something I will not enjoy, but fine, let's do this, said Lisa after seeing how long the queue was to order the food. About 45 minutes later, they finally got to enjoy their meal. All right, now I remember why anyone would queue for so long just to get a meal, said Lisa. I know, right? Although they got famous, their standards didn't drop at all. In fact, I think it may have gotten slightly better since we came the previous time, said Amy. Yeah, they might have just added a little something extra in this, but I can't put a finger on it, said Lisa. After they had finished their meal, Amy told Lisa, Okay, I need to use the washroom. Wait here for me. Sure, take your time. I need a few minutes to just sit here for a while before I can walk back home, said Lisa. Amy walked over to a sign pointing towards the washroom. As Amy walked to the sign, she saw a long, narrow corridor. Amy walked forward a few steps and missed the washroom, which was a door on her right. She walked straight to the end of the corridor. At this point, there were two doors. The left said kitchen, while the door on the right had no sign on it. The left one's the kitchen, so this must be it, said Amy to herself, pointing to the door on her right. As Amy opened the door, she saw a dark room. Immediately knowing that it wasn't the washroom and seeing what she initially thought was one of the staff, Amy wanted to close the door. But as she was closing it, her eyes focused towards what the person in the room was doing. Amy saw a lady who seemed to be about 90 years old, squatting in front of a few bowls of meatball soup. The elderly lady was fully focused at picking off dead skin from her body, piece by piece, into the bowls. Alarmed at what happened, Amy quietly closed the door and walked back to her seat. Still in a state of shock, Amy sat down and just stared at her table, still looking lost. Earth to Amy, are you still there? Asked Lisa while snapping her fingers in front of Amy's face to get her attention. I saw, said Amy, barely able to speak. You saw what? asked Lisa, sounding slightly impatient. Eventually, Amy calmed down, hastily pulled Lisa out of the restaurant, and explained what she had just seen. Days went by, and knowing how Amy and Lisa couldn't keep things to themselves, word got around about the added special ingredient to the soup. The restaurant next door owner, named Mrs. Manfredo, eventually also knew about it. She turned furious. After the meatball soup hut opened, Mrs. Manfredo tried tirelessly for months, trying to regain customers she lost. And to know that her business was affected due to unethical practice, Mrs. Manfredo was extremely upset. Mrs. Manfredo hurried over to the meatball soup restaurant and said, "Who owns this place? How can you put human dead skins into food just to get customers?" shouted Mrs. Manfredo. Suddenly, a short and small-framed lady in her 50s came out from the back with a humble smile on her face. With a soft-spoken tone, she said, "I'm Linda, and I am the owner of this restaurant. May I know, where did you get that idea about dead skins?" "Don't act all innocent here. You know what you're doing," replied Mrs. Manfredo. "What proof do you have?" suddenly replied one of the regular customers. "Okay, fine. You want proof? You just wait. I'll soon find proof and proof to everyone," said Mrs. Manfredo. As Mrs. Manfredo stormed out of the restaurant in anger, Mrs. Linda said to the customers, "I'm so sorry for all of that, but I can assure you that we don't do such things here," still with a soft smile on her face. Months went by. While the meatball soup restaurant continued to succeed, Mrs. Manfredo's restaurant eventually closed down. After Lisa found out that Mrs. Manfredo's restaurant closed, she spoke to Amy. "Hey, Amy, did you know the restaurant beside the meatball soup place closed, and that no one had heard from Mrs. Manfredo since the incident?" "I heard about it too, but let's not dig too much into it," said Amy. "Why not?" asked Lisa. "You do remember what I saw that day, right?" explained Amy. "Yeah, and?" asked Lisa. "I think Mrs. Linda is into those spiritual things and probably did something to shut Mrs. Manfredo's restaurant down," said Amy. "Speaking of which, I'm still curious about what you saw that day," said Lisa. "Stay curious. We're never going back there," said Amy. "Come on, I'll pay for the food once we're there. You don't have to eat it. Just sit there and wait while I peek into that room," said Lisa. After silently contemplating, Amy said, "Fine, but I'm never going back into that room." The following afternoon, the two girls finally arrived at the meatball soup restaurant and ordered their food. Without any hesitation, Lisa quickly got up and headed straight to the room that Amy told her about. This time, though, Lisa saw a staff member standing in front of the door, subtly guarding it. Seeing that she couldn't enter the door, Lisa pretended to look at another direction and walked back to her seat. "Okay, Amy, I need your help," said Lisa. "What do you need?" "Did you manage to enter the room?" said Amy. "I couldn't. I think since that incident, Mrs. Linda probably got someone to guard that room," said Lisa. "So, what do you need me to do?" asked Amy. "All right. I just need you to walk towards the staff member and pretend that you don't see him. Let him see you pretending to look around for a staff member. Then pretend that you accidentally saw him and call him over. Bring him to our seat and give him a small complaint about the soup. That is when I will quickly sneak into the room, just to have a look," said Lisa. "My goodness, the length that I have to go for you," said Amy. "Come on, babe, just this once. You're the best," said Lisa. Amy hesitantly stood up to help her buddy with the plan. After Amy managed to call aside the staff member, Lisa quickly went over. Slightly nervous now, Lisa was finally in front of the door. After a deep breath, she slowly turned the knob and softly pushed the door open. What Lisa saw next were two persons instead of just one, as Amy described. One of the persons Lisa saw was the elderly lady that Amy mentioned about. The other one shocked and frightened her. Lisa saw Mrs. Manfredo faced sideways from the door, giggling to herself. Hair in a mess, she wore a gray cotton t-shirt that had holes in it, and shorts that seemed to have not been washed for months and had turned a dirty brown. Through the holes in her shirt, Mrs. Manfredo scratched her skin, which gradually peeled out, with abrasions seen beneath it. Together with the elderly lady, seemingly chanting some sort of prayer, they then sprinkled their skins into the bowls of meatball soup, like a chef seasoning his food. Lisa quickly closed back the door and ran back to her seat and saw Amy talking to the staff member. Lisa interrupted and said, "Hey, Amy, something came up. We gotta go." "And, sir, can we just have the soup to go, please?" said Lisa as she spoke to the staff member. Lisa walked hastily away from the restaurant while Amy followed her, knowing that Lisa had seen something that scared her. After quite a distance from the restaurant, Lisa threw the soup into the bin, and Amy asked her, "Okay, Lisa, what did you see?" Lisa stopped walking, gathered her thoughts, and said to Amy, "I think I know where Mrs. Manfredo went all this while. The spiritual thing you mentioned. I think you were right." Both of them never visited the restaurant again and promised each other to never tell anyone else about it. Afraid that they might receive the same fate as Mrs. Manfredo. Afraid that they would be peeling skin, their own skin, to make the best meatball soup they ever had.